Hi friends, Mrs. Thompson here. Today I'm going to be doing an interactive read aloud with you. This read aloud is to go with Mrs. Bauer's mini lesson for the week, and we are going to be looking at a book called Champion Swimmer. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see our book as we read aloud together. Now you want to remember, if you have a parent that you can talk with during this time, I'm going to be asking you questions, but if you don't have a parent, you can get a pet or a stuffed animal, anything like that that you can kind of interact with while I'm reading and asking questions. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is look at the cover of this book. What do you think this story is going to be about? When I first saw this, I made sure to look at everything going on in this picture. Okay, I see that she's standing in water. I see that she's wearing a bathing suit and a cap and some goggles. I see these people have their arms raised in the air and smiles on their faces. So something exciting just happened. Okay, so this book tells me that it might be about a swimmer. Now, before we start reading, I want to tell you 4 vocabulary words that you're going to come across in this book. I want you to be familiar with them before we read them. Okay, the first word is determined. Okay, when someone is determined, it means they're having a strong wish or desire to do something. So why don't you turn and talk to somebody that you're with and tell them a time that you were determined to do something, that you had a strong wish or desire. The next word I want to go over is mastered. Mastered means learned to do something well. Can you think of a time that you mastered something? The next word you're going to see in this book that I want you to be familiar with is the word attempted. Attempted means tried to do. Can you think of something that you've attempted recently? I know I've had to attempt a lot of things when it comes to technology because I'm not very good at it. So I have to attempt a lot of things before they actually work. And the last vocabulary word I want to go over with you is the word challenge. Challenge is a job or activity that is hard to do. Again, I can relate this back to technology. Sometimes using the computer is a challenge for me, but it's a challenge I like to take on and a challenge I like to overcome. All right, let's read on. America's Champion Swimmer by Gertrude Elderley. Okay, when I look at this picture, what do I see? Well, I know the story is going to be about a swimmer, and I see a little baby in water, and she's being bathed. So I'm going to guess this is the mom, and this is the story of the person that was on the front cover, the swimmer. In 1906, women were kept out of many clubs and restaurants. In most states, they were not allowed to vote. Many people felt a woman's place was in the home, but Gertrude Elderley's place was in the water. Gertrude Elderley was born on October 23, 1906. She was the third of 6 children and was raised in New York City, where she lived in an apartment next to her father's butcher shop. Her family called her Gertie. Most everyone else called her Trudy. When I look at this picture, I wonder what is happening. I see a man and a rope, and that rope is tied to a girl in the water. Who do you think that man is? And who do you think that girl is? Let's read on to find out. Trudy spent her early years playing on the sidewalks of New York. It wasn't until she was 7 that she had her first adventure in the water. While visiting her grandmother in Germany, Trudy fell into a pond and nearly drowned. After that near disaster, Trudy's father was determined to teach her to swim. There's that word, determined. For her first lesson, he tied one end of a rope to Trudy's waist and held on to the other end. He put Trudy into a river and told her to paddle like a dog. Trudy mastered, there's that other word we talked about, the dog paddle. She joined her older sister Margaret and the other children in the water and copied their strokes. Soon, Trudy swam better than any of them. So I want you to go back and think about the word determined that we see here in the text. I'm putting my mouse on it right now. And I want you to think about the word mastered and see how they relate to this story that we've been talking about, what we read here in this page. Maybe you can reread that with your mom or your dad or your grandma and your grandpa. Talk about what those words means in relation to the story. From that summer on, it was hard to keep Trudy out of the water. Why was it hard to keep Trudy out of the water? I think Trudy learned how to swim, and then I think she really liked it. She loved to swim. At the age of 13, she became a member of the New York Women's Swimming Association and took lessons there. At 15, Trudy won her first big race. What do you think is going to happen next in this story? When I look at the picture, it gives me a lot of clues. I see people in a boat paddling next to somebody swimming in the water. What do you think is happening? Let's read on to see. The next year, she attempted to be the first woman to swim the more than 17 miles from Lower Manhattan to Sandy Hook, New Jersey. When Trudy slowed down, her sister Margaret yelled, "Get going, lazy bones!" And Trudy did. She finished in just over 7 hours, and she beat the men's record. People were beginning to notice that Gertrude Elderley. Newspapers described her as courageous, determined, there's that vocabulary word again, modest, and poised. They called her the most perfect swimmer. Trudy's mother said she was just a plain home girl. In 1924, this plain home girl was good enough to make the US Olympic team. Trudy won 3 medals at the Games in Paris. Her team won more points than all the other countries' swimming teams combined. How do you think this makes Trudy feel? How do you think it makes her parents feel? And how do you think it makes her teammates feel? I would say that probably all of them feel very proud of her, and she feels proud of herself. Who do you think that is? The picture. Maybe it's her dad or her coach. Let's see. By 1925, Trudy had set 29 US and world records. She was determined to take on the ultimate challenge, the English Channel. Many had tried to swim the more than 20-mile wide body of cold, rough water that separates England from France, but only 5 men and no women had ever made it all the way across. I wonder how that makes her feel. I wonder if she's a little nervous or if maybe she's excited. How do you think she feels? Many people were sure Trudy couldn't do it. A newspaper editorial declared that Trudy wouldn't make it and that women must admit they would remain forever the weaker sex. It didn't matter to Trudy what people said or wrote. She was going to swim the channel. Wow, I would say she is really determined. There's that vocabulary word we learned. She really wants to do it. She's determined. I see some interesting stuff going on in these pictures, and it makes me wonder what's going to happen next. Early in the morning on August 18th, 1925, Trudy stepped into the water at Cape Gris-Nez, France, the starting point for the swim. For almost 9 hours, she fought the strong current. Then, When Trudy had less than 7 miles to go, her trainer thought she had swallowed too much water and pulled her, crying, from the sea. Why do you think she was crying? Maybe she was scared. Maybe she was sad and thought she had given up. She really wanted to finish, but she couldn't. Trudy did not give up her dream. She found a new trainer, and a year later, on Friday, August 6, 1926, she was ready to try again. I love that about her. I love that she tried something, she failed, and she tried again. She did not give up. Trudy wore a red bathing cap and a two-piece bathing suit and goggles, and she and her sister Margaret had designed them. To protect her from the icy cold water, Margaret coated Trudy with lanolin and heavy grease. Why do you think they would coat her skin with a heavy grease? What do you think that would do? I think it would make it so that the water doesn't feel so cold on her skin, because it says in the text that it was going to protect her from the icy cold water. The greasing took a long time, too long for Trudy. For heaven's sake, she complained, let's get started. Finally, at a little past 7 in the morning, she stepped into the water. Gee, but it's cold, Trudy said. How do you think they're feeling by the looks on their faces right now? Trudy and her sister Margaret. They look pretty excited to me. Trudy's father, her sister Margaret, her trainer, and a few other swimmers were on board a tugboat named Alsace. The boat would accompany Trudy to make sure she didn't get lost in the fog and was safe from jellyfish, sharks, and the channel's powerful currents. There was a second boat, too, with reporters and photographers on board. As the Alsace bobbed up and down in the choppy water, Margaret wrote in chalk on the side of the boat, "This way, old kid." She drew an arrow that pointed to England. Why do you think she did that? I think she did that so she could look there and encourage herself to keep going, even if things got hard. To entertain Trudy, Margaret and some of the others sang American songs, including The Star-Spangled Banner and East Side, West Side. Trudy said the songs kept her brain and spirit good. At first, the sea was calm. Trudy swam so fast that her trainer was afraid she would tire herself out. He ordered her to slow down. Trudy refused. At about 10:30 in the morning, Trudy had her first meal. She floated on her back and ate chicken and drank beef broth. Do you think that would be hard to float on your back and eat a meal? I think it might be a little bit tricky, but I'm sure she trained for it. A while later, she ate chocolate and chewed on sugar cubes. Then she swam on. At about 1:30 in the afternoon, it started to rain. A strong wind stirred the water. For a while, Trudy would swim forward a few feet only to be pulled back twice as far. Wow, how do you think Trudy's feeling right now? I might feel a little bit scared in rough waters like that. Or maybe a little bit discouraged if I was swimming really hard and then getting pulled back by the current. By 6 o'clock, the tide was stronger. The waves were 20 feet high. The rough water made the people aboard the Alsace and the newsboat seasick. Trudy's trainer was sure she couldn't finish the swim. He told her to give up. No, no, Trudy yelled over the sound of the waves. She kept swimming. In the next few hours, the rain and wind became stronger and the sea rougher. At times, the rough water pulled the boats away out of Trudy's sight. She was scared. It was eerie being out there all alone. What do you think she's going to do? What do you think is going to happen next? Let's find out. Now Trudy began to have trouble kicking in the water. When the Alsace came close again, Trudy said her left leg had become stiff. Her trainer was frightened for her. He yelled, "You must come out." "What for?" Trudy shouted and kept swimming. Trudy continued to fight the tide and the constant stinging spray of water in her face. She knew she could either swim the channel or drown. As Trudy neared Kingsdown on the coast of England, she saw thousands of people gathered to greet her. They lit flares to guide her to shore. How do you think that made her feel in that moment? She was tired, she was worn out, she had been through rough waters, and now she sees thousands of people cheering her on. I bet that made her feel encouraged, inspired, and excited. At about 9:40 at night, after more than 14 hours in the water, Trudy's feet touched land. Hundreds of people, fully dressed, waded into the water to greet her. When she reached the shore, her father hugged Trudy and wrapped her in a warm robe. I knew if it could be done, it had to be done, and I did it, Trudy said after she got ashore. All the women of the world will celebrate. So this is the picture we saw on the front cover. They're celebrating how she just swam all that way. Trudy swam the channel in just 14 hours and 31 minutes. She beat the men's record by almost 2 hours. In newspapers across the world, Trudy's swim was called history making. Reporters declared that the myth that women are the weaker sex was shattered and shattered forever. Trudy sailed home aboard the SS Bulgaria. After 6 days at sea, the ship entered New York Harbor. 2 airplanes circled and tipped their wings to greet Trudy. People on boats of all kinds rang their bells and tooted their horns to salute her. Foghorns sounded. Trudy climbed into an open car for a parade by Lower Broadway. An estimated 2 million people, many of them women, stood and cheered. They threw scraps of newspaper, ticker tape, pages torn from telephone books, and rolls of toilet paper. When her car arrived at the New York City Hall, Mayor Jimmy Walker praised Trudy for her courage, grace, and athletic prowess. American women, he said, have ever added to the glory of our nation. President Calvin Coolidge sent a message that was read at the ceremony. He called Trudy America's best girl, and she was. Gertrude Ederle had become a beacon of strength to girls and women everywhere. The end. Thanks for listening, and thanks for joining in our Read Aloud, friends.